I'm joined today by apologist Dr. Kristen Davis on the Bible Professor. Thank you, Dr. Kristen Davis, for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Kristen, can you tell my listeners about your ministry and what you're into, what you offer?
Yeah, so I have a ministry called Doubtless Faith, where I help people who want to have a relationship with Jesus but can't seem to make themselves believe. And so I've encountered a lot of people in my course of helping and doing apologetics who have intellectual as well as emotional issues with trusting the scriptures and trusting the Bible and trusting anything having to do with faith. And so I help them move past those hurdles with workshops as well as one-on-one coaching.
Okay, great. And they can find you basically at best way to find you is at doubtlessfaith.com.
Yes, I have an upcoming workshop that's listed on doubtlessfaith.com.
Okay, all right. And we'll mention that again also at the end of the episode. Dr. Kristen Davis is helping us to think about point number 3 of the 12 points to show Christianity is true. And point is that the theistic God exists. So we want to talk about 2 primary points I want you to share with my listeners, that the theistic God exists. And then what about this God? What do we know about him? So on the first point, Kristen, the theistic God exists. So let's just say you're out in the shopping mall and someone comes up to you and says, "Hey, lady, you you believe God exists?" And you say, "Well, yes, of course." And they say, "Well, how do you know?" And so where does Kristen go from there?
Yeah, but the first thing that I do when trying to have a conversation with somebody about the existence of God is that I try and first clarify what they mean by God. And so if you study the worldview questions at all, this is the what is the nature of ultimate reality question in the worldview questions. Essentially, there's lots of people who have lots of different beliefs about God. Some people believe in the Muslim God, the Hindu gods, polytheistic, monotheistic. We need to first clarify who it is that they are talking about. What are the attributes of God that they're talking about before you start defending? Because I'm not interested in defending that any God exists. The only God who I'm willing to defend his existence is the actual God. And I think that that God has the attributes seen in the scriptures.
Okay. And so then they say, okay, so that's all well and good. That's neat. But what are your evidences that this theistic biblical God exists?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that I would do with that person is outline some of those attributes of God. And so some of the ones that we see in the scriptures are that God is the creator, that he pre-exists everything that had a beginning. He's the source of existence. The omnis that most people are familiar with, he's omnipresent, omnipotent, all powerful, that he's personal. So those are the attributes of God that I think there are more than that in scripture, but I think those ones are easily seen through philosophical arguments. So if those were the criteria that I was setting up, then the first argument that I would start with is what we would call an argument from cause and effect, essentially that God is the uncaused first cause. This argument goes that everything that begins to exist has a cause outside of itself. Now, I think one thing that we need to pause on in that point is that everything that begins to exist has a cause. Sometimes people push back on this argument and they say everything that exists has to have a cause, so then God has to have a cause too. That's not what we're arguing here. Essentially, anything that's an effect has to have a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause outside of its existence, and that cause is what we call God. What we're saying with that is essentially we have identified one attribute of God. We're not with that buying in the whole biblical God. We're buying in one of the attributes, which is that God is the cause of all of things that exist. Basically, God is the creator. He pre-exists everything that was created. I think that there's 2 things that support that. William Lane Craig did a really good job with this with the Kalam cosmological argument and pushing back on the idea that the universe didn't have a beginning. Sometimes people object from that angle and they say, well, the universe didn't really have a beginning, so your argument falls flat. But I think the second law of thermodynamics actually helps support this, that order doesn't come from disorder. There's a natural tendency in isolated systems to degrade, to disorder, rather than to improve into order. And so what we also see with the universe is the universe is expanding, which implies that there was some starting point at which everything that has expanded originally was. And so these 2 points, I think, support the idea that there was a beginning to the universe. And if there was, in fact, a beginning, then the universe requires something to cause its existence. Now, this can't keep going on and on back forever. Otherwise, just like with the game of dominoes, you'd never have the first domino to push it back, to push down the rest of them. If there is a series of caused things, you have to have something at the beginning of the chain to start it all off. And that thing itself can't be caused. Otherwise, you would never have the chain started to begin the process altogether.
Okay, really good. So you've used a couple of illustrations from science that demonstrate that the universe had a beginning, but let's talk about that actual beginner, the one who began it. What else can you tell us about him?
Yeah. So with that one, we got that he's the uncaused first cause. I think then we can also, looking at this information or looking from philosophy and just observing in nature, we can come to the idea that he's a necessary being. And what I mean by that is that there are things that are able to exist and there are things that are able to not exist. So there was a point in time in which both of us did not exist. There will be a point in time at which we will cease to exist again, which means that we are contingent beings. Our existence is contingent. If you want to think about it with the example of like maybe taking your daughter to the mall, you might say to your daughter, I'll take you to the mall, but it's contingent upon you cleaning your room. So there's something that is necessary to be the case before the contingent thing can be the case. Everything that is existence is distinct from its being, which means every being that either had a point when it didn't exist or has a point when it could cease to exist is considered a contingent being. And you can't have, once again, a infinite line of contingent beings. Otherwise, you never would get any of them. We know that there are contingent beings in the world, which means that logically it follows that there has to be at least one necessary being whose existence is not distinct from its being. Yeah, so I think is necessary then follows into another attribute of God that has to say is that God is existence itself. If he is uncaused and the cause of all things, and he is a necessary being while we're all contingent, then he is existence itself. So all the beings, we think of ourselves as existing, and we think about our existence as essential to who we are. But actually, our existence is decoupled from our essence. Because of the fact there was a point in which we did not exist, and there is a point in which we will not exist again, our existence is able to be removed from who we are. It's not essential to who we are. There's a distinction between our essence and our existence. Or there's a distinction between, our essence and our existence is the way we would put it philosophically. In God, that distinction doesn't exist. His essence and existence are combined. So he is then existence itself, and then sources that to all beings that have existence. So what does that look like? You can think about your television. You have to plug it into the wall. It's sourcing its existence it's sourcing its power from the power outlet at every moment that it has power. It's similar to that in that every being whose essence and existence are distinct are sourcing their existence from God at every moment that they exist, which means that the biblical attribute of God as sustainer is then validated through what we understand about the nature of pure actuality and existence itself.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Dr. Kristen Davis. Appreciate it. What about his attribute of just the fact that this theistic creator, uncaused cause, that he's personal? Can you talk about the fact that he's personal?
Yes. I think the personal nature of God also plays out in the idea of his sustainability. If God is sustaining existence at every moment that everything exists, then he can't help but be personal. He is touching and sourcing everything that exists at every moment that it does, which means that he can't be like the deistic God. So some people believe that God front-loaded the universe, put all of the information in, spun it up, and then just let it unwind on its own and walked away to go do his own thing. If God is the sustainer, if he's sourcing existence to everything that exists at every moment, that's not even logically possible. God would have to be personally connected, personally involved in his creation at every moment that creation can continue to exist, because should he choose to withdraw himself from it, he would, that everything would just collapse back into nothingness again.
Are there any other attributes of this God that you think we could see out there or deduce from what you've said?
Yeah. So I think when people think of God, they traditionally think of the omnis. So they think of him being as omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, basically that he's all powerful, he knows all things, and he's everywhere. And we can once again see that as a consequence of God being existence itself. So if God is existence itself, then he is the source of all power that exists at every moment that anyone has power. There is no this is kind of different than the idea of God being able to like stockpile the largest quantity of power. So sometimes people ask this question or surface this idea in the question of whether or not God could create a rock that's too big for him to lift. And they kind of feel like they can trap God because either he's not powerful enough to create this or he's not powerful enough to lift it. But that seems to imply that you're thinking about God as stockpiling the largest quantity of power, when in reality, all the power that there is, everything that has any power, at every moment it has it, is receiving that power from God. So this kind of plays out in the scriptures when it talks about how God is giving the governors or the rulers or the authorities the power that they had and the positions that they have for whatever purposes and whatever periods of time that they have it. This is like a cultural way that this omnipotence and God being the source of power is playing out in the scriptures. I think it also then plays out in relation to the omniscience and omnipresence. So if God is the sustainer, if he's sustaining your existence at every moment that you exist, then there is nothing that can be closer to you. There is nothing that can know you more personally and more deeply than the one who is the source of your existence. It's not that he is watching you through your windows and peering in to try and, observe what's going on so that he can have all his knowledge about you. It's that by virtue of being the source of your existence, he knows you even better than you could know yourself, and can be present to you. So he can be omnipresent. Sometimes people argue that omnipresent isn't a logical attribute because you can't have two different things in the same physical space at the same time. So you and God couldn't both be in your physical space at the same time. That would be illogical. But if God is the source of your existence, then he can't not be in the same space that you're in because he's there sourcing your existence at every moment. So it's not that you guys are both in the same physical space in the same way, that you guys are God is there by virtue of being the source of your existence and you being in that physical place.
Okay, interesting. Thank you. All right, Dr. Davis, thank you. What about, so point 3, it is true that the theistic God exists, and you've explained also that this is the theistic God, not just any God, but it is a God who is personal and infinite and all-powerful and all-knowing, and he is very existence itself and all these things. How does this segue us into point 4 of the 12 points show Christianity is true? Point 4 says that if this theistic God exists, then miracles are possible.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think that in order for one of the objections people have with miracles being possible is that God couldn't disrupt the natural order. He would have to do something supernatural, not natural. The whole idea behind that objection is that seems to imply that God is limited. But if there is a God who exists, who is the source of physical reality and all the laws of physics and everything that exists, then there is no logical contradiction that he could change the way things function in a period of time in order to serve his purposes. And so I think a prerequisite for there being a God who can perform miracles is that God is existence itself, that he is pure actuality and he is the cause of everything that exists. If that's the case, miracles are very easy.
Yeah, and if the God exists as the God who you have described exists and created all material, then, that was the biggest miracle ever. So any of the miracles mentioned in the Bible then after Genesis 1, they're not a problem for this God.
Right. Because if you've created everything, it's a lesser job to be able to modify it.
Yeah, even healing, raising the dead,
Right.
whatever.
Yes.
So, okay, very good. Thank you for sharing with us, Dr. Kristen Davis, that the theistic God exists. What about wrap up now, talking about your ministry and website again, so folks will know where to find you.
Yeah, so if you are somebody who is wrestling with being able to feel confident in your faith, being able to feel like you are really connecting with God, you want your relationship to be God with God to be different. I help people who are in that place. I have a ministry called Doubtless Faith. My website is doubtlessfaith.com, and I have an upcoming workshop called What Gets in the Way of Connecting with God. And so if that's something that you are wrestling with and you would like some help, feel free to check it out on my website, and I look forward to meeting you.
Okay, and so that's a live stream webinar.
Yes, it will be. I think we're right now is planning to be October 4th. It'll be a Saturday morning for about an hour.
Okay, and also at doubtlessfaith.com, can people book you to speak at their conferences or churches?
Yes, I would love that. You can reach out on my contact form and register to have me or put in a request for me to come speak at your church as well. Yes.
Okay, Dr. Kristen Davis, thank you for joining me once again on the Bible Professor.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, you will want to be sure you watch the next video in this series on the 12 points that show Christianity is true. I think it'll be a challenge for you, an encouragement, and a blessing to you. Be sure to place any comments below and, get in on the conversation about these 12 points. Be sure to like and subscribe and share this with others on your social media. Okay, be blessed. Bye-bye.